And there we go. All right, we're going to be talking today about how AI can actually deepen faith integration and learning. Dr. Hanshaw will share data and practical strategies for using AI to support meaningful interactions. There's Dr. George Hanshaw. He's going to support meaningful reflection and connection. It's a powerful example of AI used with intentions. Dr. George, would you please share with us your presentation?
Yeah, so God can use paper. God can use HTML pages to spread the word. Could God also use AI? So let's jump right into this and kind of come to some conclusions, right? Because when it's framed like that, it's like, duh, yeah, of course. So let's kind of dive into that. So here's a quick poll that I'd love for people to respond to. So do you think that AI can deepen faith reflection, or does it inevitably flatten it? So in the chat, feel free to put flatten or deepen, either way that you like. And that's a really important question, and we're going to that's what we're going to cover that today. So go ahead and put that in the chat if you would. Oh, Maura, we're deepening. All right. Ronald Lee's got deepen as well. Laura, deepen. That's absolutely great, and it can. We have to use it well, right? So the more powerful AI becomes, the more important it is that our students don't become less reflective, less discerning, or less formed. So the question is not simply whether AI belongs in Christian higher education. The question is whether it can be shaped to serve formation instead of replacing it. Because, right, it's a tool, it's our companion that we work with, and it's a great way that we can dive deeper into multiple different subjects. So why not into our faith? So this is what we found as we walked through this whole process. And the first thing that we found was there's some challenges. First, Christian worldview is absolutely central. CCCU commits every institution to moral formation, spiritual truth, and vocation in all courses. And we have an issue with that. And what's the issue with that? Well, a lot of times, if it's too much, it turns into a checkbox for our students, right? Check, did that. Well, we don't want that to happen, because formation is not a checkbox, right? It's that gradual process. And when we're fully online, it's different. You don't have a chapel. You don't have those hallway conversations. So it's different. We rely on technology a lot more. And AI is already here. You are not going to stop students from using it in life. It is here. It is readily available. So we have to really check and see what can we do to help it create formation rather than create that sort of less reflective, less discerning, or less formed individual. So that's what we set out to do with Spark. And initially, we did this with Spark as a course assistant that was literally trained on the course content and our internal LAPU document of We Believe. So that was where it was grounded. That was the ground truth for Spark whenever it would have conversations. And in the Bible courses, it was trained and given guardrails on, yes, the content that we built and other documentation as well. So that was really important and really critical to the whole process, is to make sure that we have guardrails in place, make sure that it was trained on the ground truth, and then move forward. So if you want to really take this deeper, check out Brant Himes and Jacob Hanshaw's session at 3 on Bible Reflect, where they took this and put it on steroids. So it'll be kind of interesting there if you're enjoying this one. Now, the setting we did, 778 students, 185 unique courses, 1,574 enrolled or enrollments that we analyzed in the fall of 2024. And anybody want to take, let's take a wild guess. What did we find about faith formation from our end of course surveys? We had Likert data and we had qualitative or open response data. What do you think we found? Was there a difference between those who used Spark and those who didn't for faith formation? What do you think? And the answer may not be as clear as we're thinking. So go ahead and put in the chat. If you think it was more, put a yes. If you think it was less or no effect, put in less or no effect. Let's see what happened. All right. So here's the surprising split. What students said and how they rated themselves were different. So quantitative, so when they made a response in a Likert scale, I know Likert isn't a quantitative scale, but when they rated themselves, guess what? It was the same as those who didn't use Spark in terms of Christian worldview, how it affected their course. So CWV question 14 was about Christian worldview in their course. 16 was Christian worldview, life and work. And then question 18 was about all the learning activities. And it was pretty much the same. There was no difference. So we're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Because, you just take everything for what it's worth. And we then switched over and said, okay, well, let's look at what people wrote. Let's look at some qualitative data because we had enough because question 15 would roll into an open-ended response of the same type. So what we found when we looked at that, there was 2 times more faith-specific language per 1,000 words. There was a greater LSA component, LSA2 component 2 score. So that means it was very significant. And there was a higher sentiment score in the open-ended responses. And the open-ended responses were more action-focused and more concrete than the folks who did not use Spark. The folks who didn't use Spark, they were very abstract, and their worldview frame was just a larger frame. It was nothing solid, nothing concrete. So what it basically meant was what they rated themselves was a little bit different than what actually happened. And that was the neatest part, because what we found, well, let's talk about grades for a second. What we found was in academic outcomes, there was an increase in GPA as well. So students did better when they used Spark, right? So we had better, they were able to write more concretely about their faith and how it related to their work, their faith, how it related to the course, their faith, how it related to their life. So that was a huge deal. And also they had greater grade outcomes as well. So what does that mean? That means that all around this tool, this entity, this assistant is helping student with not just grade outcomes, but is helping them with formation as well. So for example, the words reveal what the numbers hide, as I like to say. Spark users would say things, this course helped me to apply my faith to real situations at work, and then they'd explain the situation. Non-users would say things like, this course covered theological beliefs. I understand God's plan better, right? So very abstract versus very concrete. So those who had that conversation with Spark, it was very concrete. And they were, out of every 1,000 words on faith-specific language, it was almost double the use of faith-specific language. So it's very important that we kind of look at this and say, oh, okay, so I'm starting to see that we can make formation here a little bit. We can do this. So that's pretty cool, right? But why are students not seeing this? Well, it's a paradox, right? So we have blind spots that we have in our own ratings when we rate ourselves. It could be preconceived learning models that we have, or it could be the surveys and they're just marking check, 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 check to get things done. So any of that could explain the difference between what they say and what they rated. So that was incredibly important at that point. And then why did it actually work? Well, it bridged the gap of what people can do alone and then what they can do with a little bit of prompting, structured prompting, we call it. That's in Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. So it helped bridge this area here between what they can do by themselves and then what they can do with some prompting. So if I know a little bit about the Bible or a little bit about a Bible story, whatever it may be, if it's Philippians 4:8, where That's what I say. The sports psychology documentation is all written from Philippians 4, because it basically outlines what sport and performance psychology is, which is absolutely amazing. So if they read Philippians 4:8 and they see where to focus on everything that's good, everything is proper, everything. So it tells them where to focus. But how do I apply that? That's where they might fall short. So what they can do is they can read it, they can look at it, but when they get that structured prompting from Spark, who was trained and created to prompt in that Socratic method, it brings them farther along in understanding. And if you want to learn more about that session at 3 with Brant Himes and Jacob Hanshaw is going to get into great detail about that as well. So what does that mean for us? So instructor-led AI coaching. If we want students to have those big wins and have that formation, coach. So we can coach, we can show, you can use it, share a story, share a video, whatever it may be, and teaching them how to use it and showing them so they can then go on and get those active prompts so they can bridge that gap as well. And you can create your own assistants and have customized faith integration prompts in it. So imagine having a faith integration discussion online where they engage with an assistant first in something like a think, pair, share, which is such a great active learning structure to be able to use. And then AI enhanced reflection assignments. One thing that I love to do that can not only shape and form us from a Christian perspective, but also from an academic perspective, is when you use an artificial intelligence, use your assistant and have it walk you through a process of an assignment, and then you critique everything that it came up with. So it helps with critical thinking. You can do that for faith formation as well, because you can get those questions back and forth and have those really tough conversations. So you can, a student can wake up at 2 a.m. to do their work and have a really good and strong conversation about faith at 2 a.m. where we can't scale that out. So it's incredibly important that we have those opportunities for students to meet them where they are, when they are. That is the piece right there. So what we don't know yet, we don't know if it works for a long term. We know that it works in the short term. We absolutely know it. Hopefully we'll see it for long term as well. That's going to take a long term to do the testing, to do the evaluation on that. Our students who use AI already predisposed to deeper reflection. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be playing out that way. The Spark actually seems to be helping with the reflective piece, but we don't know for certain yet. And do digital natives respond differently than other adult learners? We'll find out. That's one of the questions we're trying to find out now. Can AI support discipleships and mentoring relationships, or does it inherently flatten them? What it's looking like now is that it's a great support tool for it. And it's not flattening, it's actually expanding the possibilities. So as we look into this and as we think about it, always remember AI does not replace faith formation. It gives students a scaffold to articulate their faith in that they're already forming. So that's why it's so important when we looked at the qualitative data, we saw that they were connecting faith to life, faith to work, faith to whatever they were doing. That was incredibly important that we were able to find that piece. And AI scaffolds structured thinking. So what does that mean? It means even though I may think one thing and write on a Likert score, when I actually write an open-ended comment, it shows that I've been engaging in that Socratic back and forth with the AI assistant. And why is that so important? Who knows who came up with Socratic questioning or Socratic discussions? Who came up with that? Does anybody know? Put it in the chat if you know. And the third thing is faith integration is about outcome and process. So we don't want to try to circumvent the process. We're always focused on that process where we are right now and making things that are available to move that person forward at that point. So, if nobody remembered where that came from, Socrates, right? Or in the greatest movie ever, was it Wayne's World, where they called him Socrates? Yeah, that was a person. That's where that Socratic, Jacob got it, Socrates, absolutely, back and forth comes from. So as students have that push and pull, that back and forth, they're thinking and they're using their critical thinking, because we're not using the assistant as an answer machine. And that's the critical piece. If we were to ask an AI assistant, what is Philippians 4:8? It just told us what is Philippians 4:8. Learning really didn't happen there. But if it said, hey, Philippians 4:8 refers to where we should focus in life, what are you thinking, and how do you think you can apply this in your life? That's where that Socratic piece comes in. So now they can use it. So they're engaging their own critical thinking. And when it asks questions like that, it connects to their previous knowledge. So it makes it stick. And that's what we want. We want to create that sticky learning. All right. So with that said, this is How We AI. This is our practical approach to teaching with artificial intelligence. Myself, Craig Brewer, and Shannon Hunt wrote this. It's supposed to be incredibly, not supposed to be, I hope it is, very practical way of using AI in your teaching. And there's a lot of things in there. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to any questions.
Awesome, George. Thanks for sharing. Any questions? Go ahead and post them in the comments page right now, and we'll get those asked out to George. George, where would you suggest for an educator who's looking to do more faith integration? How should they start addressing that within assistance they've already developed within their course?
You know what? That is a great question. And I would take a very structured approach to that. I would create a system prompt, because like with Nectar, we can create system prompts. So we give it its personality, how it works. So step one, make sure it's Socratic in nature. Step two, give it the documentation that you want it to answer from. Because we don't want it just to go out to the web and grab whatever and bring it back, right? Who knows what we'll get when we do that. So we want to put those guardrails in on what it's getting from and giving you those responses. So that's really the best part. And then build it, test it yourself, give it to other people to test, tell them to break it if they can, and then go from there. Put it into the wild and see what happens, and then adjust as it goes, just like our keynote, build, deliver,
iterate,
iterate.
Iterate.
Because that's the only way we can live in this world today, is by iteration, because things are moving so quickly that if we're sitting there pausing and having too deep of a thought in terms of, should I move forward? Having that analysis by paralysis kind of, or paralysis by analysis kind of thing, we're never going to make something that is meaningful for our students.
Yeah, for sure. I remember I was part of the first pilot. I helped create the first pilot when we first started looking at Nectar for integration in our courses at LAPU. And I remember just loading up from our Bible course all of the papers that the professors had written, like the content that we were having students read, and I put it into the assistant, and we put in Nectar has this option where you can do topic knowledge, where it will only supplement whatever it can find from the outline it creates from the content you upload. And it blew our professors away, who they were like very skeptical, thinking it was going to hallucinate, create all these kinds of problems. But because of that knowledge that we gave it to begin with, it actually sounded like the professor. I got a lot of comments from those professors. It sounds like something I would say. This sounds like something I would write. Like, it actually really does do a great job. So that knowledge that you train on, that you mentioned a minute ago, George, is so key for training and making sure those assistants are staying within the boundaries of the good biblical knowledge. So
right. Really, and Brant, who's up at 3 for the Bible Reflect assistant, he piloted that for us.
He was the pilot, and he was just blown away. He was one of our, and he was one of our AI skeptics, really, as we were looking into implementing AI within our courses, and it
Right?
changed his mind. It absolutely changed his mind just because of that conversation he began to have. So that testing and iteration, make sure you bring in people who are knowledgeable on the Bible, or who can help look at and test what it's saying, and make sure they're looking at it and testing with the assistant with a skeptical mindset. You'll find it's probably pretty accurate and does a good job. And then if not, iterate, add more content, add more guardrails, add more to the prompt to adjust how it says. There's some great posters about creating AI prompts. Check that out. I posted one. There's lots of good content today. So,
and that's the thing. If anybody's thinking about building one and using it, if it's not working correctly, it's your fault. Change it. Right? Adjust it. It's not the assistant's fault, right? We're making it. It's our fault. So adjust it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And the boundaries of what these things can do are, to an extent, are limited to our imagination. And so get creative, invite others to, iterate on what you've done as well, and collaborate with other, professors or other staff members to just define and recreate those. I think you can create some really neat things. We got a question from Jessica Clark. What do you find is the best strategy for advocating for course assistance with AI skeptic faculty or administration? George, you want to talk about that?
At this point, now this is my personal belief, that I'll answer the question. If you're a faculty member at this point and you are so skeptical that you refuse to use them, you are doing students a disservice, because we know it affects their grades positively. We know it affects their faith formation in a positive way, and it affects their efficacy and their intrinsic motivation to learn. So if you're not using them, you're doing your students a disservice. So we know this now. Now we have to use them in an ethical way, correct? So I would lead with how it helps students, and then lead with how to ethically set it up so it uses that Socratic method, because it can act, when used correctly, it increases critical thinking. When used correctly, it increases people's creative thinking as well. When used incorrectly, guess what? Yeah, that's where we have that cognitive offload that people talk about when we use it as an answer machine. So the way I would do it directly, Jessica, is I would say, okay, yes, you know what? It can cause cognitive offloading if it's not used properly, but you're in control. You can use it properly. Here's how. So accept that skepticism at first, and then tell them how it can be overcome, is how I would do that. Because it can have negative influences when used poorly, when used incorrectly. It absolutely can. There's a lot of studies out there that show it. But there's a lot of studies that show opposite effects when it's used ethically and judiciously and equitably.